we've got teams, we've got ourselves as leaders or team members already tapped out to some degree. So if we're going to want to meet challenges with resilience, if we're going to want to bring our best creative ideas, we need to proactively, and I would argue strategically, invest in our resilience.
Welcome to the Optimized Workplace. On today's episode, we're joined by Marie-Hélène Pelletier, a CEO, leadership psychologist, keynote speaker, executive coach, and author, workplace mental health expert. With a unique combination of academic credentials, clinical experience, and business expertise, she teaches courses on leadership resilience and workplace mental health at UBC Sauder School of Business. She also has a phenomenal book that she's going to be sharing with us this afternoon. So I can't wait to get into this conversation. Welcome, Marie, to the show.
Oh, Fran, thank you for this great introduction. I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, our topic today is addressing creativity, change, and innovation. And we're going to explore all of these elements and how they're essential to not only personal growth, but professional growth and organizational success, especially in the landscape that we're in right now, post-pandemic, and really hybrid, remote, just a really juxtaposition of the workforce and really what's helping in the state of the workforce today. So let's kick off this conversation, if we can, Marie, around what leadership is facing today and how leaders can identify and leverage the unique strengths of their team, especially to enhance mental well-being. What do you think about that in this whole state of resilience?
We are facing a lot, right? And, given that resilience is our ability to go through adversity and come out even stronger. So there's this growth element. In order to go through all of these demands and grow, we need to get there with as much resilience as possible, as much strength, as much energy and health. Otherwise, it mostly hurts. And no, we're not going to grow that much. And so what we're facing, especially now, is a combination of acute demands, so specific moments in time with higher levels of demands, but also chronic ones. Forces, economic forces, political forces, various changes, AI coming to the workplace and to our personal lives. And we're still at the tail end of pandemic in all these years that also took a toll to different degrees with different people. And so what this means is we've got workforce, we've got teams, we've got ourselves as leaders or team members already tapped out to some degree, right? Mm-hmm. So if we're going to want to meet challenges with resilience, if we're going to want to bring our best creative ideas, we need to proactively, and I would argue strategically, invest in our resilience.
That's very rich. I think you're right. And I think people are finally recognizing that. We've gotten to an inflection point. We're probably past the inflection point of folks realizing we have to invest in it. So let's dig a little deeper in that. I'm curious, in your line of work, I think people think about the basic things, right? Like having, stress reduction programming, maybe having a mental health app, maybe having advocacy within the workplace and even for themselves that they would, I think people are starting to finally feel comfortable in saying, I need a mental health day. But I'm curious, are you seeing any unconventional approaches or strategies to addressing this issue around resilience in the workplace?
Let's start with the first part of what you were talking about, the basics. And sometimes what happens with the basics is these, and by the basics here, a lot of people assume things like making sure that you're exercising, cardio, strength training, meditative type activity, nutrition, sleep, relationships, spending time with people you enjoy spending time with. Well, let's pause right there. If everyone did these 4 things on a weekly and daily basis, everyone would be better, because these that we call basic, because we've heard them so much, right? It's like, oh, okay, give me something new, please, right? But wait a second, when I actually ask people, how much exercise in the past 2 weeks? How many hours of sleep? How is your nutrition? Well, we're not doing optimal on sometimes any of these 4, sometimes one, but not in a consistent way. And so literally, if resilience was a mathematical equation, these 4 variables would probably account for most of the variance on our resilience. So we want to not say, well, they're basic and all, let's assume we're all doing them. No, we're not. We're not. And it is an opportunity. So there's that. There are additional ways, right? On the individual level, you could be spending time in nature, making sure you're protecting time for creative endeavors, investing in volunteer time. There are other activities as well.
Mhm.
In the workplace, we want the individuals to invest in their own resilience. We also want the teams to do that, and we want the organization. And the reality is that all parts of this system, individuals, teams, organization,
Mhm.
everyone already is full. No
Mhm.
one has additional time waiting for you and I or someone to say, oh, let's try this new thing. Hence, the absolute necessity, in my opinion, to actually step back and create a plan that is strategic, meaning we're stepping back, and that's true at the individual, team, and organizational level. It's just done by different people. But let's say you and I want to do our part, so we're looking at it individually. It means we're stepping back and looking at our values. So, what's most important for me in life?
Mm.
My current context, and in the book, I guide different types of exercises to identify this, all very concise, all very short, but get to the point and give you the information you need so that you create a plan that's actually realistic, that you can implement, as
Yeah.
opposed to this list of 20 things you would love to do, but you don't have time for any of them, right?
Yeah.
So
That's such
the new frontier is the strategy.
yeah, I love that you're bringing up strategy, right? Because I think that you do have to find ways to make what's old new again for yourself personally, for your organization, and the fact that the pillars really don't change. If you're not getting enough sleep, if you're not, managing what's going into your intake, then what's going to show up is going to be a horrible, expression of that, right? So I think you're absolutely right. Those pillars. I love though how you talked about that it's at multiple levels because you could be doing really wonderful things for yourself individually, but at an organizational level, if the organization is toxic, for instance, or if your team is not one where really everyone's coming together and collaborating equally, and one person's carrying the lion's share of the work, then that adds to another level of stress too. So I really love how you talk about the different points that have to come together. And I'm sure you express this a bit in your book, the resilience plan. I'm curious though, if we can unpack a little bit. Typically, when organizations bring you in and they're asking you to address things, I know for us as an organization, we talk about something called the well-being maturity model because in every level of the organization there should be well-being and there should be well-being touch points. But I'm so curious with your work, Marie, when organizations actually bring you in, are they willing to address all 3 levels, or at least eventually address all 3 levels, or are they only focusing on one micro level, say organizational versus individuals? So curious.
It varies. It varies because for organizations to increase their focus on the overall mental health of at all levels within the organization, it is for many new. It was new 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 months ago, or now, but everyone is on a journey. And most organizations, it is rare. I have seen a few that from the beginning went all in, and there was a specific context that created that particular picture.
I think we saw a lot of that during COVID. Like I was talking to a colleague the other day, and she said that, now organizations are doing everything and nothing's working because there's no strategy around it. It's just like, let's just throw everything at everybody. Give them a Fitbit, give them Calm, give them, workouts, give them a nutritionist. And now it's like everything, it's like spaghetti noodles and nothing is working.
Yes, and that's exactly true. That being said, even that is movement compared to before, right? These organizations that are now throwing all of these tactics, if we can call it, right? It's like a bunch of actions and just random acts of wellness, we call them. But this is still movement because none of this was happening a few years ago. So does it need to be now brought into a more organized, deliberate strategy? Yes, that's probably the next step for an organization that would be in that situation. But what I love is that everyone's on a journey, and wherever you're at, as long as you're continuing to move things along, you're moving. And so, yeah, sometimes they are very focused on the individual, and part of the next movement will be to broaden to the full system. Sometimes they're very focused on other parts of the system. Great. And sometimes we even need to be strategic about how we bring it in. If there is support within the organization right now for a more team focused effort, or for a more organizational focused effort, or for any, let's take it. Let's take it, because if that's where the energy is right now, that's where the investment, the focus, let's take it. It will all contribute to leading us to an even better place. Eventually, yes, we need the full system, but you know what? Done is better than perfect. I'll take any movement, and then we can build from it.
That's a good one. That's a really, really good one. You got to take what you can get, basically, is the bottom
Yes.
line of that. So, one of the things that we often talk about is starting with the end in mind, right? When we sit down with our leaders, it's always about what's the end goal? What do you want that to look like when you say you have a well balanced organization, that your organization has a real maturity level around well being and what that looks like, or a model or a strategy? Let's talk a little bit about the benefits, because I think that's really important for those who are listening. We have kind of soup to nuts on people who listen to the Optimized Workplace podcast. So thank you if you are listening. Remember to listen to us at your favorite podcast station or platform where you like to listen to your podcast. But let's talk about the benefits a little bit, because I think that's so important, Marie, for leaders to think about that, because oftentimes, if they haven't invested before, if they have no idea where to think about strategy or how to put that together, then it's almost like there's a reluctance, or it's just too much, it's too big of a lift. So what kinds of benefits have you seen from organizations that are willing to really invest in and proactively approach a balanced, mental health, resilient type of workforce?
It's such an important question, because it's all nice, right, to invest in all these things, but these things demand our energy, our time, sometimes financial investment as well. So, of course, being in a business, you need to think about all of these components. So, what I have seen some of it myself in my work. We've seen it in research, and there are studies reporting on this. Obviously, given that we have our humans as the most important resource in our organization. Soon they'll have an AI colleague for most of us, but we still have humans here. And humans are hard to recruit. So you're seeing an easier recruitment. People will be attracted, especially younger generations that have heard about mental health way more than any later generations. They value it. It's part of what makes their decision to join in an organization. Your retention will also be better. It was hard to get this talent. You want to retain it. Of course, we'll let people grow and go into different places over time, but for a period of time, we want to retain them, right? It is also that people will report a higher level of engagement, which leads to even better performance. And as all of this is more present, we will be, which connects to our earlier point, more creative, and therefore better able to innovate, implement all these creative ideas. What I would say is, if we're in an organization and we're defining our particular goal, we will want in our mental health strategy to include elements of measure. Right? How are we going to measure that we're reaching whatever goals we're looking at? So it could be any of the ones that I was mentioning just now. Most of the time, again, from a very practical perspective, I encourage organizations to look at measures they have already, as opposed to trying to design a most beautiful way of measuring everything, which they don't have right now, which will take them forever to build, which means nothing's going to happen now. Again, we want movement. So, no. Let's look at what measures do we have right now. If all we have is number of sick days, okay, we'll take that. Yes, we want to be realistic about the time frame, the other variables that are impacting the outcomes we're looking at measuring, but we want to be realistic about the measures we're using, the timeline we're expecting to see changes in, and then we're rolling.
That is so good and so important because you're making it accessible, right? You're not saying go out and try to take it all on at one time. You're really saying start with incremental goals, make the decision to start and start with what you have. And I love how you're talking about the fact that, if you're metric driven, start with the data that you have. Every organization today, I think it's actually the opposite problem. They have too much data. And so now they're trying to figure out. I was just in an AI conference maybe a month ago when they were talking about healthcare data and how they want to use AI and the protections they need to put around AI and using and reading healthcare data. But the problem is they have so much data and they have data in different departments, and the data doesn't really read. It's not able to you're not able to get a clear lens because the data is being processed in lots of different ways. So I think you're right. You really do have to start with where you are. And I think this is where I think where HR really comes into play, right? Because HR is already tracking something on some level of variance or variables or measurability. So whatever HR perhaps is using could be helpful. So
Yes.
as we take our last few minutes here, I'd love to talk a little bit and really talk to the leaders who may be listening in, because we have a lot of individuals who listen in who are CEOs or CEOs of just, small practices. I would love to talk a little bit about what they can do. And I think that there is a really fine line between being a high performance, get it done, highly successful, ambitious leader, but at the same time, making sure that you're maintaining your mental health and well being and balancing that. And you gave those pillars earlier today. Any tips or tools or nuggets that you could share about how leaders can navigate that fine line between high performance and resiliency and balancing the two?
So important. It feels sometimes as a leader that you're like this athlete who's training at the edge of overtraining, right? We're just at that line that if we trade more, we could hurt ourselves, right? So and seeing that line sometimes is tricky, right? Sometimes we realize we crossed it after we've crossed it. So as leaders, I would say for yourself and people around you, you do want and need, I would argue, to step back for a moment and create your own strategic resilience plan, meaning you identify what directions you will invest in and what concrete doable actions you will bring in a realistic way in your life. Because in the absence of, and this is simple, literally, I know I work with professionals and leaders all day, every day. That's all I do. I've done that for decades. So I know that no one has time. And I also know you need this. Right. And so in the work that we do, everyone's plan going to look different. And that's what I help people do in the book there. But here's a couple of examples of what seems to bubble up often in the individual work that I do. It will vary from individual to individual because your context varies. But just to give us some, like you say, nuggets, right? What kinds of things am I already doing this, right? Often leaders will tend to see their recovery in an active way. They will go do something. They will exercise they'll be on their bikes or they'll be running or, they'll be very active in their recovery. So to build their resilience, which is great. Keep that. You need it, like we said earlier. But here's a component that most of the leaders I work with have not yet optimized. It's meditation. They don't like it. They think they've tried it and that it's not for them because their brain was not slowing down and they got irritated at the voice that was talking, guiding them through the thing. The reality is that, as you know, research is 100% clear. It would help all of our brains if we were all doing this on a more regular basis. So that may be an example. And if you're really unsure or you don't have time, here's a very small way to start. Every single time you wash your hands, 5 deep breaths, starting with air out until there's nothing, and then back in. By the time you've done this, will be about 20 seconds. You will have done 5 deep breaths. That's one way to do it. Here's another area. As we go through identifying people's contexts and what could be part of their strategy, often people will realize they are feeling pressured all the time. They're running all the time, and extremely busy, all the time, and it creates pressure. One of the things that they sometimes realize is that they tend to underestimate how long everything takes them. They think it's a 5-minute drive to pick up their child. It isn't. It is 12. So they're stressed all the way there. They're feeling pressure when they get there. Or they think a certain task is half an hour at the most. It is not. It is 3 hours. We wish it was half an hour, but it isn't. So a concrete next action may be to time yourself to see how long does it actually take you. You think it's 30 minutes? Put the clock on and see how long it actually takes you. So that this allows you to create more realistic expectations for yourself and manage your time differently, giving you time to breathe. So that is another example. And there are others that for us to explore, but these are some
They're
concrete.
great. No, I think those are fantastic. I love the one on breathing. I have to say, I actively focus on breath work myself. I was actually in the dentist chair for 2 hours and 15 minutes yesterday for a very intricate crown that they had to put in a molar. It was just a long story. But bottom line is, I practiced controlled breathing, and I also had on some really calming music. And it was amazing. The doctor kept checking in on me because, they numb you up and you're like sitting there with your face kind of open and you're wondering if you're drooling. It's just a horrible situation, but whatever. He kept asking me, "Are you okay? Are you sure you're okay? You're the best, most calm client we've had all day. And I've done like 4 of these things plus a root canal. Nobody's been this calm." And I truly, truly value and know it's because of my breathing. The 10 counts, I do 10 counts in, I hold for 5, and then I release for 10. And it slows down, it calms your nervous system. It focuses your endocrine system. I feel like my brain calms down. And to Marie's point, the more you learn to do controlled breathing and really allow your mind to slow down, your mind is a muscle. And if your mind is wired all the time and you go, it can't work effectively for you. You can't do your best work. You can't be creative. You can't be the high performer all the time. It's like you're trying to run on adrenaline all the time. It just doesn't work. And this podcast is actually being recorded during the week of the Olympics. So if you watch those high performance athletes, you recognize that you really do have to have a really strong methodological training when it comes to performing at your best. They don't work out 24/7 all the time. You have to have balanced time for rest. Your brain is the same. Your body's the same. So that's an amazing point, Marie, that you bring out about the breathing and meditation as well as really watching your schedule. So I love that. Thank you so much for sharing those nuggets.
Yes, my pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us too for the Optimized Workplace. It's like the time goes by fast. Whenever it's a great topic like this, resilience is such a great topic. And the Resilience Plan is Marie's book. So please be sure to pick it up. Dr. Marie-Hélène, it's fantastic to have you here. I have no doubt that there are so many golden nuggets in your book, not just exercises and tips, but ways that you can retrain your brain and really retrain the way in which you're approaching your mental health and your life overall. So again, thank you so much, Dr. Marie, for being with us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much, friend.
And thank you all for joining us for the Optimized Workplace. Again, I'm your host, Fran Dean Bishop. It's been my pleasure to welcome you in, and hopefully you've taken away some really good tips and strategies from Dr. Hélène and just our discussion overall that will help you every day in your mental health, resilience, and overall well-being. And remember, as I always tell you, it's many and that small monumental moments that make the biggest difference in your life. Take care, everyone.